In South Africa, the idea of a national dialogue has been on the table for years, promoted as a way to bring the country together at a time when divisions, corruption scandals, poverty, and governance failures have threatened the very fabric of society. It is supposed to be a forum where all voices, not just political elites, can be heard. It is meant to be a bridge across race, class, and ideology, where South Africans can speak to one another honestly about where the country has gone wrong and what must be done to set it right. This week, the first official convention was held at UNISA in Pretoria, and while many leaders, activists, and citizens attended, one absence overshadowed the entire gathering. Thabo Mbeki, former president of the ANC and the Republic, the man who has long been a driving force behind the concept of a national dialogue, refused to attend. He and several legacy foundations chose to boycott the event, saying it was rushed, poorly organized, and excluded genuine citizen-led leadership. For many, this felt like a betrayal of the very principles on which the dialogue was founded. For others, it was a reminder that South Africa still struggles to balance inclusiveness with urgency when it comes to nation-building. Thabo Mbeki's absence is significant because of his history and the role he has played in shaping the country's democratic project. After succeeding Nelson Mandela in 1999, Mbeki became known for his intellectual style, his focus on African Renaissance ideas, and his attempts to steer South Africa toward both economic modernization and continental leadership. But his presidency was also marred by controversy, most notably over his handling of the HIV/AIDS crisis, where his reluctance to embrace antiretroviral treatment cost lives, and later by the bitter power struggle with Jacob Zuma that split the ANC in two. After leaving office, Mbeki largely stayed out of frontline politics, but in recent years he returned to public debates, often stressing the need for accountability, ethical leadership, and citizen participation. His foundation and several others, including those linked to Steve Biko and Desmond Tutu, have been pushing for a genuine national dialogue rooted in civil society, not just government agendas. So when he refused to attend this convention, it was not a small gesture. It was a clear statement that, in his view, this process has already lost its way. Mbeki and his allies argue that the convention was rushed into being without enough groundwork, without the proper involvement of the preparatory task team that had worked for over a year, and without adequate transparency on its budget and its true purpose. They claim it was presented to the public as though it was the official launch of the national dialogue, when in fact it was something quite different, organized by a group that did not fully represent the foundations and civic bodies that were supposed to lead it. In a letter made public earlier this week, Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi, chair of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, said the terminology used by organizers was misleading and that the convention risked being little more than a performance rather than a genuine conversation. She insisted that if this process is to succeed, it must be owned by the people, not driven by political calculations or rushed schedules. The ANC, however, sees it differently. Gwede Mantashe, the party's national chairperson, did not mince words when asked about Mbeki's absence. He said one of the most important lessons of leadership is to let go when there is a new leader, and warned that if former leaders cling too tightly, confusion and division follow. According to Mantashe, the convention was not about individuals, not about the ANC, and not about Mbeki himself. It was about South Africans speaking to one another. He suggested that Mbeki's decision to stay away was more about personal difficulty in accepting his diminished role than about any flaw in the dialogue process itself. This is a striking accusation, essentially saying that Mbeki's pride, rather than principle, motivated the boycott. President Cyril Ramaphosa also weighed in, using the metaphor of a tent. He said the convention was the real tent where conversations must take place, and that it makes little sense to remain outside, criticizing from a distance. His view is that dialogue is inherently messy and imperfect, but it only works if all players are willing to enter the room. In his speech at the convention's opening, Ramaphosa urged unity and openness, saying the country cannot afford endless delays and endless excuses for not talking to one another. His call was clear: the time is now, and those who truly believe in dialogue must join, not boycott. Outside government, some voices were more sympathetic to Mbeki's concerns. Bantu Holomisa of the United Democratic Movement said that the doors should remain open to organizations and individuals who have chosen not to attend, including Mbeki. He argued that given Mbeki's experience and institutional memory, his contribution is too important to discard, and that perhaps he will reconsider once he sees that the dialogue is meant to benefit all South Africans. Others echoed this sentiment, saying that a dialogue without moral leaders and respected figures risks lacking legitimacy, no matter how many delegates attend. This disagreement is not just about one man or one event. It speaks to deeper questions about South Africa's democracy and where it is heading. On one hand, the ANC and government want to move quickly, to show momentum at a time when citizens are increasingly disillusioned with politics. On the other hand, many in civil society argue that if the process is not truly inclusive and carefully built, it will collapse under its own weaknesses. They fear that what should be a transformative national project will instead become another tick-box exercise, more about image management than real change. The stakes are high. South Africa faces staggering challenges: unemployment hovering at record levels, growing inequality, crumbling infrastructure, an energy crisis that refuses to end, corruption scandals that have drained public trust, and a political landscape more fragmented than at any time since 1994. For many, a national dialogue feels like the last best hope of creating consensus on a way forward. If such a project fails, or if it becomes captured by narrow interests, the consequences could be devastating. Looking ahead, there are several possible outcomes. One is that Mbeki and the legacy foundations eventually rejoin, perhaps after new assurances are made about transparency and inclusivity. Another is that the dialogue proceeds without them, but struggles to gain credibility, seen by the public as more of a government initiative than a people's movement. A third possibility is that the tension itself forces the process to improve. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay informed about South Africa's unfolding political landscape, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video with others. The more we talk, the closer we get to building the kind of dialogue that can actually make a difference. Your voice matters, and I cannot wait to hear it.